that you hear endlessly that Iran is planning to nuke the United States, that that's on their agenda.
So this is where discernment is really needed, okay? Because people know fake news, right? The legacy media, the CNNs, the Fox, they're fake news. That doesn't mean everything they say is false. There are some things that they say that are true. They just tell you the truth about it because it serves another agenda. I haven't trusted Tucker for a while. I just don't. There's just been some red flags. But he serves the military-industrial complex. And who he's saying this to is David Sachs. David Sachs literally was part of the military-industrial complex. He had a show on Morning Joe, and I guess, I don't know, in the last couple years, he got thrown off of there because he said something truthful about the Ukraine war, and then you're made to believe that he's just spilling it about the military-industrial complex. There's some simple things to recognize here, okay? One, does it seem like it's in anybody's best interest for Iran to get a nuke? No. And they had already enriched uranium up to 60%. This has been an ongoing problem with Iran. But the way Tucker presents it and the way David Sachs enters it, he's like, what? Iran wanting to nuke the West? It's like, well, death to America. Okay, make all the excuses you want. But there's a reason the military-industrial complex has never wanted us to address Iran. It should be a simple thing that just takes some discernment. Why would they never want us to address Iran? Because it keeps this continuous flow of terrorist organizations after terrorist organizations after war against Israel, keeping a bunch of people all through the Middle East in ruins under, false terrorist organizations like Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah. It's just an endless cycle of suffering, war, and nightmare. So if you deal with Iran, then that problem gets dealt with. Can you see why the military-industrial complex would never want that dealt with? Yeah, that's why. So, of course, Tucker and David Sachs, who they both still serve, they're just there to try to twist things still. That's what, it's very crafty. That's why I think for some people it may be hard to pick up on, because people may think, yeah, but the news is saying all this stuff like that I'm saying about Iran. Yes, they are, even CNN. That doesn't mean CNN's on the good side of anything. It doesn't mean that Sean Hannity isn't a neocon, okay? All of that's still being true. But the fact is that, no, Iran absolutely would nuke the West. They would. They see us as infidels. Where do you think the radical Muslim stuff came from? Where do you think all of it through the Middle East came from? There. Okay? So, it's very, very simple. If you deal with Iran, then you deal with that whole nightmare in the Middle East, like being over once you've dealt with them. And I think people are made to believe, oh no, we can't go to war with Iran. Look, the only reason with Iraq that we didn't deal with Iran is because the military-industrial complex always wanted Iran to be that threat that still goes after the Jews. It's the truth. I'm not saying we should go into a ground war, but I don't think it's going to come to that. I think this is being so overblown in every way. There's just those big players, the military-industrial complex and others, that love having that continual cycle of violence and destruction and killing of Jews and back and forth, okay? So common sense should tell you that a long time ago, Iran should have been dealt with. We never would have got ISIS. We never would have got the Houthis. Hell, if we would have dealt with them early enough, we never would have gotten even Al-Qaeda and had 9/11. So it's sometimes confusing because not everything that the legacy media says is false. They just tend to have a motive for why they are telling you the truth. So you have to separate those things. Again, I only know it because I learned about the whole Middle East history, much of it because of looking into why 9/11 happened, and just, through 30 years of just being, interested in why this group does this, why this, and ultimately it all goes back to the Iran and them being funded. That's why Tucker's said some other things that have been red flags to me in the past too, and I think just like David Sacks, just like Tucker, these people, they left their networks, okay? And then you're supposed to believe that they left because they're getting honest. No. Nobody in their right mind should ever want Iran to get a nuke. They just shouldn't. And if you deal with Iran, then you deal with that entire nightmare in the Middle East. It no longer will be a problem. Again, what once used to be Egypt and all the surrounding Middle East countries all hating Israel, many of them have backed off and they want nothing to do with it anymore. Because they just, it's Saudi Arabia, just getting sick of it. Am I saying that they love the Jews? No, but they just want peace. They get tired of it after. Anybody would, but Iran, nope, they stay on their track. Because Iran sees it as a religious thing. It shocks me, David Sacks, the military-industrial complex dude himself, doesn't understand that fact. Your radical Islam came out of Iran. And so they see it as a religious thing, too. They see it as their duty that the infidels, which would be us, the Christians, need to either submit to Allah or be killed. So there's no doubt they would nuke us. There's no doubt they would nuke Israel because it's a religious thing to them. The military-industrial complex knows that. We could have dealt with Iran a long time ago, which is always, stumped me why we haven't. Because when you know that history, that all of those terrorist organizations that have come and gone have all been funded by Iran, have all been backed. They give them logistics support and everything. You think, why wouldn't we just deal with them so then the whole Middle East could be in peace? But the military-industrial complex is not about peace. So the very fact that both Tucker and David Sacks here are just acting bewildered about why. Of course Iran would, as if they're a peaceful country, okay, please. I would say that the Iran is the military-industrial complex baby. Because if you do look at it biblically, I'm not saying that just because Allah believes all the Jews and Christians should be wiped out, they're false God, doesn't mean that's the way the biblical God sees it. But you need to recognize that the biblical God still is like the Old Testament God. You just have to be able to discern when it's a just war. You do. I get many people would say, no, God wanted peace. He does, but he doesn't expect you to just roll over either. He doesn't expect you to be stupid. Okay? So, is what Israel's doing just? Yes, in my opinion, absolutely. Because it would liberate a bunch of people. Iran should have been dealt with a long, long time ago. And what these people do, like Tucker and all these other ones I always mention, is they're on this side. We don't want forever wars. This doesn't have to be a forever war. But if they know God, then they should recognize when something is God's will and it means it's something just is being done. The military-industrial complex was never about being just.